David McFadden Trip, a reminiscence on the occasion of the 70th birthday of the author of A Trip Around Lake Ontario and many other marvelous travelogues, memoirs, and collections of poetry. I'd always wanted to join David McFadden on one of his trips, so when I happened to mention a place I'd been reading about that sounded quite interesting and he suggested we go, I was delighted. "By the way," he asked, "is it far?" "Unfathomably," I replied, "according to the guidebooks." "So how long do you think it'll take us to get there?" "Well, about 12 to 15 seconds, depending on traffic." "And how long will we stay?" "Dave," I said, "we're not applying for a travel grant. Let's just keep it open. But at the most, say 6 or 7 minutes. It's an amazing place, apparently, lots to see. But most people say a relatively short visit is all you need. Or can handle," I added, hoping to further intrigue his adventurous spirit. It worked. "Sounds great," he said. "Let's go." It was a Thanksgiving dinner toward the end of the second millennium. The restaurant owed me some time off, so I'd managed to clear my schedule all the way until the following morning. As I awaited Dave's arrival, I reflected on another Thanksgiving a couple years earlier, or perhaps later. On that occasion, Dave was to join my family for turkey dinner at our apartment. Never having been there, he got lost en route and was considerably delayed. To be fair, the apartment was underground, and its address was displayed in Roman numerals, and I may have inadvertently used Cockney rhyming slang when I told him the name of the street. But surely his Taoist instincts could have led him to our door before the gravy got cold. If I were to fictionalize the event, I would have my wife say something like, "He can find his way around the Great Lakes, no problem, but finding his way across town to our apartment seems quite beyond him." The truth is, I don't remember what she did say, or even with any certainty what she didn't. For that matter, I don't recall how Dave finally ended up at our place. This was prior, obviously, to mandatory GPS implants. But I do recall that he was splendid company. Dinner conversation revolved around gerunds, and at the end of the evening we all felt charmed and illuminated by his presence. But that was well before, or after, the evening that concerns us. October 11, 1993 to be precise, or perhaps 1994. But today I realized that it had to have been 93, and that would have been Dave's birthday, which is also coming up in a few days. That's why I wanted to record this tribute to him. Dave arrived around 8:12, right on time and ready for our trip. My friends from BC had loaned me a vehicle especially for the excursion, an odd two-seater they'd nicknamed the Dymaxion Model T. We carefully packed it for the journey, making sure we'd remembered not to bring anything, and were soon sitting side by side with a shared sense of wonder and trepidation. "Shall we take turns driving?" asked Dave. "Splendid idea." With a "here goes" sort of glance to my travel companion, I cranked the ignition, closed my eyes, and in no time at all we were off in a cloud of smoke. "That's a good book," observed the sage-like stranger as he drifted past me on the otherwise empty subway platform. "I've been there." I was absorbed in an obscure tome about the ancient Arthurian mysteries of Glastonbury Tor and environs, which I hope to explore during an upcoming trip to England, when suddenly this Merlin-esque being materialized out of nowhere to affirm my spiritual quest. That he may have simply transferred from the Bloor line made his presence no less remarkable. Magician or apparition, I determined not to let him slip away before I could at least ask a question or two. Who knew, perhaps this was my guru, offering one chance to recognize him and further my spiritual path toward revelation. But after catching up with him and chatting for a moment or two, I realized that no, despite his obvious wisdom and benign nature, maybe he was, after all, just some guy on the subway. And yet there was something uncannily familiar about this individual who was so comfortably uncommon in his bearing. Not to say there was anything the least bit outlandish in his appearance. That he gave the impression of wearing a cape without actually wearing one seemed to be part of his nature. Clearly, I was in the presence of a rare intellect, one so accustomed to generating synchronicities of this nature that he could abide them with nonchalance, quite happy to discuss the latest speculations on the geomantic zodiac of the Somerset landscape with me, but somehow imparting the sense that his day had already been quite rich enough with young men interrogating him on the subject. It so happened that we both disembarked at DuPont Station, just down the street and across town from where we would set off on a journey together one Thanksgiving evening 4 or 5 years hence. For this curious outsider, it finally dawned on me, after we'd shaken hands and parted, was none other than David McFadden. I'd known of McFadden since I was a teenager, scanning the local library shelves for the most unusual Canadian poetry I could find. Later, after crossing the plains of southwestern Ontario to settle in Toronto at age 20, I got to experience his work firsthand. There were many fine readings to attend that summer of 1982, and the best ones tended to feature the author of The Ova Yogas and My Body Was Eaten by Dogs, reading poems such as 34 Lines About Horses to an eager audience that hung on his every, how shall I put it, word. Thanks to a bit of luck, I even got a chance to read on the same bill as McFadden, way before I ever knew how to pronounce mollusk, let alone write a decent poem. But that bearded, short-haired McFadden was different from the clean-shaven, long-haired, bespectacled McFadden I'd encountered in the underground. Here was a hero with, if not 1,000, at least a couple faces. This is not the place to recount how I eventually became permanently acquainted with David W. McFadden. That story, I'm sure, will form a captivating chapter in the biography he's writing about me. Or was that a dream? How embarrassing, that was just a dream. Well, in any case, I really should get back to that night when we returned home from our trip in the Dymaxion Model T. It was still light out when we got back to my apartment, which is odd because the sun had set around 2 hours earlier. I paced excitedly across the living room carpet, but Dave was content to recline on the floor with his back against the sofa. He had a beguiled look on his face, like a mathematician who'd just been told a new species of horse had been named after him. As for myself, I was in a state of astonishment bordering on what Jules Verne's translator might call stupefaction. My God, I knew from the brochures that it was a unique spot, but who could have imagined? Why isn't this place on the news every day? Maybe it's just so astounding people can't believe it actually exists, even after they've been there. Or maybe its attractions are too terrific, in every sense, for the average tourist to withstand. Do you suppose that's why it's not an approved destination, that our government is protecting us from exposure to the marvelous? Or is it just that it's so extraordinary, so full of secrets, that they don't want us to even talk about it? I mean, did you see that... I saw it all right, said Dave. I saw it all. I'm just not sure what any of it was. So you're not going to write about it? I asked, secretly fancying myself a character in one of his literary adventures. He seemed for a moment to ponder how he might go about writing a travel narrative about our strange little vacation. His steady gaze focused on something only he could see, and as he turned toward me, I noticed a slight but dramatic billowing of his invisible cloak. Sometimes, came the answer of my guru, my friend, It's good to be just a tourist,